I'm going to turn this over to Camilla to introduce our guest today. She's our community manager, and if you haven't had a chance to meet her yet, you'll be able to meet her today. So go ahead, Camilla.
Yeah, hi. So I'm the community manager here, so you've probably seen my posts in the forum or in the Facebook group. And I'm really, really excited to introduce our speaker today, who was really, really kind to come in and speak to you all about a very important subject that seems very relevant today, and that is stress management. So today we have Elyssa. I'm hoping I don't say your last name wrong.
No one says it correctly, so you're fine. It's
Gottheim. Is it
Gottheim.
Okay, it wasn't too far. And Elyssa has a master's degree in social work and a bachelor's in psychology, and she works with children, teens, and adults. And I'm going to turn it over to her. I'm sure she'll do a much better job in explaining more what she does in detail and answering any questions that you have.
Yeah,
Hi.
thank you. Well, thank you for having me. So I'm in Houston, Texas. I have a private practice. I work closely with a lot of schools around here and different pediatricians. I would say the bulk of my practice is really with kids, teenagers, and parents, helping also with parenting issues, but I also do see a lot of adults. So really what I'm going to be talking about today is that idea of just being pulled too thin at work. You know, everyone is feeling a lot of stress and a lot of the pressures that are coming, especially due to COVID, depending on where you are, maybe election issues, just personal issues. So just really the stressors of life and just how they're really pronounced right now. So I'm really going to be looking at that and looking at ways to help with stress. So I tend to be really informal, and I'm actually happy that there's fewer of you because it makes it a little bit easier. So if anyone has anything, as I'm going, if they have a question, they have a comment, needs clarification, please, you can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can type it up in the chat, whatever you're more comfortable with. At the end, I obviously will do any questions you'll have, but I know that sometimes people forget as they go. So you're welcome to ask as I go along. So I have a lot of friends that are teachers. A lot of my colleagues are teachers, and they just in a normal year talk about how stressful starting in the months of October it becomes, and that October is often a really big time of teacher burnout. There's daylight savings, there's the cold weather, there's just fatigue on part of teacher and students. There tends to be a decrease in focus and engagement by the students, and more negative behaviors tend to pop up as their comfort level increases. So naturally, October is kind of a time when teachers tend to feel a little more of that fatigue, stress, and burnout. Well, this year is kind of like October came early, and it's not really going away. It's almost like October happened last March. So ever since, COVID kind of came into your areas, just really the constant changes, the unexpected, the unpredictability of everything within your school, what's happening with your students, what's happening with their families, it's been added onto the stresses that you already have. So it's kind of like an extra 10 layers of stress and pressure for teachers. So really it is like now that stress has really been accentuated. You have the health and safety precautions that maybe you're having to complete with your school on top of already existing health and safety precautions. You're having to manage student and parents' added stresses, anxieties, and questions on top of regular anxieties and questions that they maybe have. There's also, a lot of the schools have a constant unknown of, are they going to go virtual? Will I have to have my students out of the classroom? Will someone come down with COVID? There's also your own personal health risks, and the list just kind of goes on and on and on. So the way I kind of think about it is, in a normal year, normal, the teaching is kind of like you're like Play-Doh. So you're constantly being stretched thinner and thinner in different directions. Normally, in a normal school year, you have more time to really take a break, embrace yourself, take care of yourself, so that you never get too stretched too thin where the Play-Doh breaks to form a hole. With COVID, it's like stretching that Play-Doh and adding pebbles to the Play-Doh too. So it's just more weight on it, and it's getting pulled thin faster and faster. And you're also having less time to feel like you have to yourself to take care of yourself. Instead of having pebbles taken away, you probably feel like just more and more are getting added on. So the idea is that you have to realize that the Play-Doh can only stretch so thin. So you can only do so much. So what we'll really talk about is understanding your limits, your signs of stress and anxiety, and then ways to really take care of yourself. And when I say ways to take care of yourself, we'll talk about very realistic ways. I think that a lot of times when people talk about it, they kind of have these ideas of, you have all the time in the world, or you have all the resources in the world, and that's not really reality. So I'll really try to give you concrete ways to really think about it. So just signs of stress and anxiety. So there's 3 areas to look at. There's your behavioral and emotional area, the physical area, and the mental area. So with most mental health issues, they do have those 3 components. So really kind of thinking about that. One of the big things to keep in mind is that when I talk about these things, I want you to keep in mind that all of this really means like changes in. So, you want to look at if there's been a change in one of these areas, and that is what indicates a change in your stress level. So for example, in the behavioral and emotional area, one of the first things is if you're restless or agitated or tense. If you tend to be a more irritable person as a general matter, you have to look for a change in that. So don't just monitor it based on your baseline. So if you're feeling more irritable, more aggressive than normal, if you notice more tension in your body, if you notice an increase in sensitivity, so you notice that maybe you're more likely to get upset about things, more likely to cry, more likely to get your feelings hurt about things than you had been in the past. If you're having difficulty with social situations, whether that means, I understand that in our given world, social situations are different and possibly limited for a lot of people. But just thinking, how do you look at them? How do you manage them? Are you able to put yourself out socially in ways that you can within your limitations? Like, are you still calling friends, or are you isolating at home? So an increased or excessive worry, or always expecting the worst. I think that's kind of the one thing that people really traditionally think of when they think of anxiety. The couple words I always tell people to cue into are if they use the words always, never, I should, I need to, and then those words like worst, most, things like that. So those are really key words to tune into if you're trying to understand if you have increased or excessive worry. Another is if you notice yourself to be more avoidant. Another is if you tend to have ruminating thoughts. And what that means is kind of obsessive thoughts of thinking about the same thing over and over again. So running through the same situation in your head, kind of like talking to yourself in circles about a certain topic, trying to predict the future. Those are really the kinds of behavioral signs of anxiety. So the physical signs are sore or tense muscles. So one of the big ones that people will notice is if their shoulders, like if you have to think about putting your shoulders down, that's one kind of sign of like feeling anxious. Also, in your forehead, your teeth clenching, those are also signs. A frequent needing to pee more often. So that's honestly another sign of anxiety, is having to go to the bathroom more often, even if maybe you're drinking the same amount of water. Having a chest pain, a racing heart, a headache, a stomach ache, a lot of those somatic reactions that we tend to think of as like the little kids when they come to school and maybe get homesick. Those are very natural in adults too, to have that kind of sick to your stomach feeling. Sometimes, like I've heard a lot of people refer to it as like that's impending doom, sick to your stomach feeling. And also a difficulty sleeping. So that's a really huge one, noticing changes in your sleeping pattern. When I say difficulty sleeping, that could mean you're sleeping too little or you're sleeping too much, right? So changes in your sleeping pattern, because you could be sleeping not enough because you're up and your thoughts are keeping you up, your tense body's keeping you up, or you're sleeping too much as a way to escape those racing thoughts. And then the mental signs would be a difficulty focusing, a difficulty remembering, and being easily distracted. So I kind of tell, y'all are all teachers, those typical signs that you think of children with ADHD. They're just not focusing really on you or what's happening. Can't hold anything in their memory. So it's important that you understand these signs, and especially understanding your own baseline, so that you understand when you are experiencing these signs, because by doing that, you'll understand when you're feeling anxious. If you don't understand your own baseline, you don't understand what kinds of things that you experience personally, then you won't have the realization that you are experiencing anxiety, and you almost kind of start to normalize it. So that's when a lot of times, so if people have a 0 to 10 scale, most people don't jump from 0 to 10. It's a slow progression that we're not even aware of. So if you think of anxiety as a 0 to 10, maybe on a day-to-day basis, you kind of pre-COVID exist at a 3. And then maybe you notice over time, over the past months, you've risen up slowly to a 5, 6, 7. The goal is, by understanding your stress and anxiety signs, that you catch it before it gets too high, so that you can lower it sooner. Because say you catch yourself at a 9, it's going to take a lot longer and a lot more work to get down to a 3, as opposed to if you catch yourself at a 5, to be able to go back down to that 3. And just, this is a non-presentation aside, I'm at my home. I do have a 2-year-old. I just heard him. So for anyone who hears him in the background, I'm sorry. He's just running around screaming. So just FYI. So just understanding that scale. So that's why it's really important to understand your warning signs. So one of the things that I learned in social work school that has really stuck with me is, like when you go on an airplane, and sure, a lot of people have not been on one too recently, but they always tell you, please, I'm going to mess it up because it's been that long, like, please put on your mask before helping the person next to you. Well, there's a reason they say that. If you are gasping for air, how are you going to help the person next to you? Right? So, really applying that example to your stress and anxiety. If you are so stressed and you are anxious and you're stretched thin, how could you possibly expect yourself to help someone else that may be going through that, such as your students or the students' parents or even your coworkers? So, really understanding that, I think a lot of times when we think about self-care, it some people have a tendency to see it as a very selfish act. Just like if you thought like, well, putting my face mask on first would be selfish. Well, it's actually the only way that you can really provide for someone else. You have to be at your best to be able to take care of someone else. So I think that if you take anything away from this talk, I think that is really key. So just it really accentuates how important taking care of yourself is. So I'm actually going to now go into just what I consider realistic ways to take care of yourself. So just keep in mind, because they're realistic does not mean they're easy. I think a lot of times when I talk about self-care and just de-stressing with people, sometimes it seems like, oh, well, like, yeah, obviously I could try to do that. But it's really the action and the putting it into practice that's very difficult. So even just the first thing, which I'm going to say is creating boundaries. I know, as teachers, based on the many teachers I've spoken to, that is a very difficult thing. You go into this profession because you care about the children, you care about their families, you want the best for them. But being able to set up those boundaries and say, okay, between these times, I won't answer a phone call unless it's an emergency. Between these times, I won't answer an email. Setting up those boundaries for yourself and even letting people know, like, hey, like, these are the hours that I really do need for myself, can really help you have that time to revitalize yourself. I think that is probably one of the hardest self-care things for people, but I do think it's one of the most important. So I know as a therapist, if I get an email, I kind of say like between 7 and like 8, like 7 p.m., 8 a.m. So like to be more specific, between 7 and 8, unless it's an emergency email, I don't answer it. If it's an emergency, I tell them you need to call me and leave a voicemail, right? So I really don't even look very much at my work email in the evening times, because all my patients know if it's an emergency, you have to call me. And I think that also helps people take a step back and kind of say like, okay, is this an emergency? So even that simple one boundary. So even just setting one boundary up can be helpful for you. Another thing to keep in mind is that self-care is not about your basic functions. So I had a friend send me this like meme they recently saw about like new moms. And it was basically something along the lines of, for a new mom, self-care is not taking a shower. For a new mom, self-care is not brushing her teeth, right? Those are not things of self-care. Those are basic daily functions that you need to take care of, right? So when I'm telling you about self-care, I don't want you to think, oh, well, taking a shower is self-care. If you want to take a shower as self-care, take a luxurious shower, put like they have like these shower bombs in there now, like take a bath, take a bubble bath and take your time. But just taking a shower, just taking a bath, that's not self-care. That's a human need. Okay. So really it's dedicating specialized time for you. And these don't have to be long, elaborate things. They can be watching a 20-minute show. It could be reading a chapter of a book. Doing, one thing I do every morning before I see anyone is I do the USA Today crossword puzzle online. Like, that's just part of my self-care routine. And that literally, well, now you'll know how long it takes me, but it takes me like anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes. Like, that's a short little thing, but it's something I do. I don't let myself really answer emails or anything until I do that. So things like that, where they don't have to be these long, drawn out things for self-care. Because I think a lot of times we do think of self-care as either, long drawn out in time, or also long drawn out financially. People often say like, oh, go get a massage, go get a manicure. First of all, a lot of people aren't doing those kinds of things right now with COVID, but also self-care shouldn't always have to cost you something. So it's important to really keep that in mind, like what helps relax you. So another key way to take care of yourself is getting enough sleep. I know this is feels like a silly thing to talk about, but it's actually extremely important. Making sure you get enough sleep is key. Your mind needs time to rest. I'm sure you talk to your students about needing sleep, whether if you have little, young students having nap time and giving their minds time to take a break, or if you have middle school, high schoolers and they need, their rest too. Everyone needs it. You need it too. So again, don't just preach it, but do it. Another example would be some mindfulness or meditation. So this is actually something that people talk a lot about, but they don't often give very concrete examples or ways to do it. There's several apps that I really like. One of my favorites is the Calm app. It's a really great one. There's another one, and I'm blanking on the name, but it has the icon is like 3 little stones like piled up on top of each other. But honestly, if you go into your phone and just type in meditation or mindfulness, there's a huge list. And what I tell people is you have to find the one that works for you. And some of these meditations are just, 5 minutes. I just got an Apple Watch and it gives me a 1-minute reminder every once in a blue moon. I'm sure it has a regular amount of time it tells me, but to take a 1-minute break to just breathe. So, just having those kinds of things can be helpful. Another thing is called what I call a self-soothing bag. And this is a type of thing that you could keep in your office. You could keep in your classroom. I'm sure your kids would also really enjoy it. So it's just like a little bag that you take with you that satisfies your 5 senses. So meditation and mindfulness are all about keying into your 5 senses. So in this bag, you would have things that help remind you or bring you relaxation and comfort based on your 5 senses. So if I were building a bag, I would maybe put in like a cinnamon stick. That's a very comforting, relaxing smell to me. So that could be something that if I'm feeling stressed, I could smell that. Outside my office, I have a sound machine. I actually this is probably people in Houston either love this or hate this. The sound of the rain is very relaxing to me. So I will have the sound of the rain if I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. So that would be sound. Sight, a picture that maybe brings up really happy memories. Maybe even just have a vase of some flowers in your room. They can be fake, but just something that makes you feel happy. A lot of those koosh balls, with the spiky things, or those balls that you can squeeze, thinking putty, things like that you can manipulate and use your senses with, are really good things to have in that self-soothing bag. And it can just be something you like take out for yourself every once in a while during the day as needed. Another thing is your as I call it a 5 senses activity. So what this would be is, and this takes a very little amount of time, is you would sit, on your own and think about your 5 senses and just kind of recall to yourself what you're noticing with each sense. So noticing what you're smelling, noticing if you have a taste in your mouth, noticing what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and touch. And touch would be even things like I can feel the collar of my shirt on my neck. I can, hear the air conditioner. I can see the chat window. Things like that, because your 5 senses are actually what do ground you and is what mindfulness and meditation is all about. Another way to help take care of yourself is just check in with yourself. Not only check in with yourself, but have friends at work that you can check in with too. Really, I think that people have a tendency to retreat when they're feeling anxious and stressed, but really it is a time to reach out to other people to really have that sense of community. So in terms of that, I've been talking to several schools about wanting to implement with their faculty kind of like faculty check-ins, faculty like support groups, with lack of a better word, just kind of like, a time for faculty to come together and really talk about the stresses they're going through and really just be there to support each other. Another thing to do is educating your parents and families that go to your school. Educating them on stress, educating them on what's going on, educating them on, even letting them know like, hey, like, we're really stressed at the school too. It's a very overwhelming time for everyone, and we're doing the best we can. Here are some of the things we're doing. Here are some things that may help you. I think that honesty and openness can really help create that sense of community with your parents. And then the last thing would be really focusing on what you can control and maintaining that flexible thinking. I'm sure that back in, I just keep saying March because I don't know when everyone's had the effects where they are, but back in March, who would have thought that they could have lasted the rest of probably last school year not going back to the classroom? Who would have thought that they could have quarantined for as long as they had? Having that ability to say like, wow, like I've been through all of these things. I've managed my stress. I can do this. Having that flexible thinking and the ability to say that like I am capable and that I can control certain things, and really looking at what you can control as opposed to only the things you feel that you cannot control. So hopefully some of these self-care ideas were maybe ones that are more tangible, ones that feel a little more realistic, and that are usable for you in your real life and not just, I guess, floaty ideas. But that's all I have. But I can open it up for any questions.
Anybody?
Yeah. Kathleen, you're on mute.
Yeah. Hi, this is so timely because last night I had a long conversation with a friend of mine. She's 81 and her husband is 86, and he's now fully in depends. She is the one that has to prepare his meals, make sure that he takes a walk, and he's a bit of a curmudgeon, so none of that is easy, for her. And she spent 3 hours with her grandchildren yesterday, which was longer than she usually does. And she was feeling guilty. And I said, Anne, please, you can't feel guilty. And I just reminded her today that years ago, as a single parent myself with a newborn and a 6-year-old, right after my husband left, you know, she said, you have to watch it. You have to take care of you. Because if you don't take care of you, you can't be there for your children. And it was probably the best piece of advice that I've ever been given. And so I would read 20 minutes from a favorite novel, you know, or do some of the things that you say, and it really matters. So last night on the phone, I was able to give all that back to her, the gift of 44 years ago, you know, back to her. But I think it's hard for us to think that sometimes those simple things, you know, like just going in your bedroom, reading a chapter of a book can reset us. And it's so important, you know. And I really loved your idea of you don't do anything from 7 at night to 8 in the morning. I think all administrators should do that. It's just a courtesy. I mean, I get emails at 11 o'clock at night and I think, what are you thinking? I'm not answering you, you know, until tomorrow. So it was nice to hear you give permission, as it were, for us to say that boundary, you know.
And I love the example you gave. And I think that when you mention, like, you know, reading for 20 minutes, a huge piece of self-care, and I truly believe it, is the intention you have when doing the thing. So if you go in with the intention of, I'm going to take 20 minutes for me, those 20 minutes have a very different feeling than if you just go and sit and read for 20 minutes, right? It's a very different experience, and just telling yourself that this is something that you need to do and this is care for myself can really help have that much of a stronger effect.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also, I think another thing that I found helpful was, and we can't do it now because of the pandemic, but my younger daughter took ballet, and I would drop her off at the ballet studio, race home, get into bed, and journal. And then get out of bed, race to the studio, and pick her up. And it just, you know, I could have done a million other things. Probably I should have done a million other things, but I did that for my sanity. And it was a set time every week that I knew I could count on, you know, with the exception of her being sick or something like that. So now we have to kind of be more creative because we're not taking children anywhere, you know, after school, but, or maybe we are, I don't know, there's sports. But just carving out that time weekly for myself, it made a world of difference. It just made a world of difference. So.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to agree that I think an important part, particularly being tuned out between 7 or 8 at night till 7 or 8 in the morning, I've always done. And as I say this, I have a similar rule. If the parents at my school need me, really need me, call me. But otherwise, you know, unless it's really critical, that's my time to just separate myself. Also spend time with family and not feel like I need to answer something. I need to answer, you know, husband, children, etc. But it's a me time, and I find that extremely valuable. I try to say that to my staff too. You know, you can put boundaries around your time. It is your time, and you need to address things, obviously, if they're critical. But I think probably 98% of them are not really critical, A parent might think it's critical, but I don't think it's really critical. And that's helped me a lot in just kind of separating myself. And I know my evenings, it also, since I've done it for years now, I mean, I really think it's affected my sleep too. I go to bed at the same time every night. I wake up at the same time. I just find, well, you know, how valuable is consistency for children? Same thing for adults, I think. I mean, if we're on the same schedule, at least it helps me. I don't know about others, but it's helped me a lot, so.
And one other thing, you know, along those lines of, you know, that 98% are not, you know, that important. typically if a parent is emailing you at 10, 11 at night, that's their anxiety, right?
I
And when
think
you answer it right away, that reinforces their anxiety and their need to send you that message and expect the immediate response, right?
Right.
But if you give them that time, some parents will send an email at 11 because they're like, oh, I'll forget in the morning, so I'll just do it now. The other half are, I'm so anxious, I don't know what to do about this. But you're not their therapist. You don't need to help them manage their anxiety. If it's important or not. And if it's that important, they will reach out to you, in a way that they will get you immediately.
Mhm. Mm. I like your scale also of the 0 to 10, just kind of judge where you are so you can get back to where you need to be. That's a good thing to just reflect on,
Well, I'll share what I used to do when I was working in an office, and at the school, we had, I think there were 3 of us in the office, and the best thing about my office was that it had a door. And if I was feeling like just overwhelmed and I know you all know what this is like, but you feel like you're interrupted every 2 minutes. And so you can't even get an email out, it takes a whole morning just to compose an email or so if you're having one of those days, we just had this understanding among us in the office that, what, when my door's closed, please don't, unless it's an emergency or, which happens sometimes, but, and usually it just took maybe 10 or 15 minutes just to kind of regroup and just close my door and just say, what, please, and it doesn't stop the phone from ringing, of course, and if you have that understanding, if you have other people that you work with and they have their time too to do that, and you respect that, I think we found that to be really helpful. And even in the middle, maybe it's in the middle of the 3-hour cycle, so that it's after drop off and before midday, not during the busy times, but just to allow yourself that time, even during the workday, to just take a few breaths and a few minutes to not have the constant interruptions.
Mhm.
Anyone else have questions or ways they've really felt they've been able to take care of themselves?
I have a question. I've never worked as an administrator, but I've worked alongside administrators, and my mom worked as an administrator for many years. And so I've definitely observed the stresses that she's experienced. And I think a big challenge for her was establishing boundaries with high maintenance parents, and these high maintenance parents who require a lot of time and attention and can often be draining. How would you suggest approaching situations like that? Because that can be a real struggle to kind of say, you know what, like, this is not okay to always be contacting me about your child or always causing a problem. Take a step back, and there's not really that much of a problem there.
I definitely understand that. I mean, especially, your private schools where parents are paying to go, there's obviously parents, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, like feel that, they're owed a little bit more entitled. It does make sense logically, and yet there needs to be that balance and realization of, hey, I am a human being too. I definitely experienced that a ton in my private practice. So, sometimes what I'll do is if I have a very overbearing parent, I'll say, send me an email once a week, and I will, I'll read over your email. And I tell them sometimes, your email doesn't really require a response. If you just want to update me, that's fine. Send me an update. You can send me it on Friday. And then I know, you know what? I don't really have to look at that till Monday. But the parent feels good that they sent it on Friday. Or I tell, if it's a very overbearing parent, I say, okay, well, if it's very important to you, we can schedule 15 minutes every Tuesday to talk. And you only give them 15 minutes. You even time it that you have something right after. I'm very sorry I have this, scheduled meeting I have to be going to every day afterward, but this is also the only time I have flexible and available. So kind of thinking about how do I set those boundaries and being respectful. I do think a lot of it is having to be forward, having to be not always liked 100%. I mean, I definitely have parents that don't like the boundaries I put on them. And then we talk about it, I have to put these boundaries on for myself and, for you to understand boundaries for your child too. Obviously explaining that as a teacher or administrator is going to be different. But kind of keeping in mind that you're actually doing them a disservice when you don't give them boundaries, and you're doing the child a disservice when you don't give the parent boundaries.
Mhm.
Those are great strategies, actually. Yeah.
So Dolores mentioned exercise, and
Mhm.
Yes.
I know that's a really big one for me.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, for me, I have to go out for a run every morning. That's my self-care. I always feel much better when I get back. I was just curious what other people do if they have a routine like that, or
I do
have
too,
time for anything.
with walking. I do walking every day, and it's the time I carve out for me. Depending on what my daily schedule will be, it can be from 9 to 10, or it can be from 2 to 4, or when I get home, 6 to 7. But I fit it in every day because I really feel a difference if I don't. I just did, it's just, I just feel from my health and whatever, and overall just feel like, it's kind of my quiet time where I listen to music and I just enjoy the quietness, I guess,
Yeah.
Mm.
Karita says walking, yoga. Yeah, I think these are all great.
Mhm.
It's finding the time, right?
Yeah.
Well, and knowing that the time doesn't have to be, no one says you have to spend an hour or even 30 minutes doing it. You can spend, you can take a 10-minute walk during a lunch break if you need. I mean, I don't know if your schools will let you, but you could always take a 5-10 minute walk at some point. It doesn't have to be a 30-minute walk.
I noticed too with some of my staff. Right. I noticed with some of my staff will comment how, oh, I just didn't get time for break today. They have the break time, but they don't take it. And, I often see the ones who continually do that, they're so much more anxious than the others who, whether they sit and read a book or just meditate, whatever it might be, but don't take that time. It really does make a difference.
And isn't it true it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you say, I don't have time, I can't, then you don't.
Right.
But if you carve out the time, you can. And I heard a doctor once, I know doctors, every time you hear a doctor, there's a different idea. But the one that helped me a lot was that 3 10-minute walks a day as if you're late for an appointment. So meaning, I guess, really walk. Is as effective as 30 minutes sustained walking. I don't think one's better than the other, but for people who have time crunches, you can do a 10-minute, probably, fast walk and do it 3 times a day. One of my daughters getting ready for her wedding, at her lunch break, she walked the 45 minutes that she had, for lunch, and it made a huge difference. And she looked very nice in her wedding dress too. because it does, it does help.
Mhm.
But
I mean, I'll say, you know, with my, so I have a 2-year-old, but you know, when he's starting to drive me crazy, we do like literally it's 2 minutes of yoga, but he knows my favorite is, I don't even know what it's called because I don't do yoga. Like we literally just like stretch our bodies like this. But the last minute is we lay on our back in silence. He says, mommy's favorite pose. And like, even that minute's great. Like, you know, sometimes it just takes a minute.
Mhm. True.
Any other questions?
well, if I just can comment on the importance, I think, of sharing with staff what you're experiencing. I think that we, as administrators, think, well, we have to have it all together all of the time. But community is really built with, you know, I'm finding this hard, are you? And then they can see, you know, because our teachers are working so hard and they're in the classroom and everything is different. But God bless the administrators who are dealing with everything, you know, everything you've just mentioned. Parents who need more hand-holding, you know, teachers who say they don't have time and they're the ones that are stressed out and making everybody a little bit nuts, you know. And so it's kind of a style that I've always had, like for staff meetings, do a check-in, like 3 or 4 sentences about how you feel or what you're struggling with. And then we can support one another. Of course, now everything is on Zoom, even though the teachers are in the same building. But, you know, I think that's really important, you know, to be as transparent as you can with boundaries, you know.
Mhm.
So, and maybe it's a resource we don't use a lot because we feel we have to do it all and nobody needs to know or should know how we're really struggling. But I think there's a balance there where you can share the struggle and invite others into it, and then you're invited into their struggle. And that's what builds, you know, community.
Community. Yeah.
Very good point.
Mhm.
Jane, corpse pose.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it is a different time. Our teachers are much closer now to our parents. Our parents are much closer to the teachers because they've been thrown into it together, and only by helping each other has this been able to, you know, to work. And I really liked what you said about, you know, the difference between what we can control and what we can't control. Because if we go into the area of feeling we can't control it, that's where the anxiety and the depression and all of that, it's very panicky producing. And who would have thought, you know, here we are in November,
Mhm.
and this has been our life since March, you know, and it will continue to be our life, sadly, if the predictions are right, for another few months. But if we just stay in the moment, stay in the day, and do these things for ourselves,
Mhm.
and find the joy, you know, where we can, it'll go a long way to, you know, to helping keep our sanity, you know,
Yeah.
which this is a great challenge. But as you've said, we've done it for so many months already. So when we're feeling weak and tired, we can look back and say, oh yeah, I've been there, you know. So anyway, so this is perfect timing. Your talk today, perfect timing, I think, for all of us. I was on another site, and an administrator, she has, I think, 50 teachers and 250 children in the school. And she just had a complete and utter meltdown. And the whole time she was melting down, she was apologizing for it. And we were saying, well, this is the place where you do have the meltdown, because we all understand, you know, what you're going through. And, you know, we helped her kind of in a way that you have done today about taking care of herself. And the big thing is not taking on more than we can do.
Mhm.
And she was struggling, I think, with trying to reinstate aftercare. And she lived with it for about 3 weeks, and I can't do it. I know the parents need it. I know the parents want it, but I can't do one more thing. And she set that boundary, and then she felt peaceful, you know. So we're called to be different people at the moment. Maybe stronger people. I don't know. Maybe not different, but yeah. So that might be another self-care thing. Only do what you know you can do, regardless of what people are telling you they want you to do, or that you should do, quote unquote, or that they need you to do, you know. So.
Thank you,
I think
Kath.
it's a good point with the timing you said when you brought up about how far we've come. I mean, from where we were. I mean, utter hands in the air in March. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How can we flip on a dime to create an online program? And, you know, that's one thing every Friday we have Happy Friday at our school, and I'm actually just working early in the morning and then going in later in the day because I'm compromised and over 70. So, but I find that, you know, just reiterating that, like, wow, I mean, we're to November. I mean, this is fabulous. I mean, this is fabulous. I mean, we don't know how long it's going to last, but, you know, can't go on forever. I mean, it is going to end. But I think just trying to keep uplifting on once a week to the staff to say how well they're doing. And I think it helps a lot, just the morale, because I felt initially in April, it went, you know, from here to here. And now the confidence is there and people are slowly getting there. There's still a lot of struggles within the classroom because it's very different, but you know, it's, we've traveled a difficult road, every school, every business in the country. And I, you know, if you're floating above the water, I think that's pretty good.
Thank you, Janet. And in the chat, Jennifer said, we have increased our communication with parents as well. More information out and more transparency. It seems helpful. That's great. That's great. And Dolores said, that is what is difficult for me to do because there is no one else to take on the load. I am the guide as well as the administrator without our office manager at the moment. So I feel everything is on my shoulders and the co-administrator to say no.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. It's a lot. And on our staff, or in our staff, we have 2 women who are going through divorces that were preset before they're not a result of COVID, you know, and one who's on her way, I think, to having her marriage dissolved. We've had one staff member who just lost her uncle to COVID. And one teacher whose husband had COVID. So she was out of the ball game for 14 days, as was her 3-year-old who attends the school. And yet the container for helping with all that is there. And so, you know, they're still there and they're still working and thriving and being so glad that they can, you know. So it's a tricky time emotionally, as you know, for a lot of people. And that's where the communication with staff helps, because then you know what's going on, you know, with them. And they know what's going on with you. I've lost 2 first cousins and a grandson. So it's, you know, it's hard stuff. But sharing it what's that saying? Something doubles the joy and halves the grief. There's a Irish saying or some saying.
Yes, there
that
is.
says that. Yeah. And I think this is a perfect time to implement that, you know. So, yeah.
I know I've had through our online learning a parent Zoom once a week, which I've continued, and bedtime stories for my children I do on Tuesdays and Wednesday nights because I don't see the little ones. But I do find the communication with the parents, I mean, they're all feeling the same thing that we are. And it's, you know, it's a challenge, but it's nice to just, you know, share with them what you know, where the teachers are and what they're doing, and just saying it's a very different environment for, we're a Montessori school, so having the social distancing and having the way the room is set up is so totally different than what we're used to. And trying to say to the parents that, you know, you can't get in there to see, because of course I won't let them in there because nobody goes in except the kids, but it's frustrating for them too, because they, you know, they want to hear like, how is it really working? You know, even though we give pictures, but they feel so kind of out of touch too, because they would normally come in and chat and whatever, and that's not there now, and it's a real loss for them. So but I think the more there's that two-way conversation with the parents, it helps to build community, and hopefully, as I say, if we go through a future shutdown, which is a possibility, you know, they'll stick with us and pay tuition, because we are tuition based. So it's that communication tool is so important, I think.
Yeah, thank you. And Dolores says, thank you for doing this today. The timing, as Kathleen said, could not have been better. It is positive to share our struggles and help each other as a community. Sharing the emotional load helps. That's great. I mean, that's really what is so important, is having a community where you feel comfortable enough to share a common struggle. So that's great that you have the space to do that here, and hopefully you feel supported by other Montessorians. That's really our main goal here with our town hall meetings, and having great guests on board to give some really, really amazing tips for stress management like Elyssa did today. So thank you very much, Elyssa, again. Does anyone have any final questions as we're coming up to our hour now? I think maybe Alyssa's done a really, really good job. Oh, sorry, Camille.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I just wanted to throw it out for ideas for future town halls. You know, we really want to bring speakers in, or if somebody has something that they want to share with the group, you know, we could brainstorm here for a minute, or you could drop it in chat or send Camilla or I an email. But really, we're always trying to put our heads together to come up with ideas for this, and you know, just really want to hear from you. Nobody knows better than you than what might be helpful right now. So don't be shy.
So I'm really sorry, but I have a 1:30. So
No.
I have to go, but I will put, I'm gonna put my email in the chat in case anyone wants to get in touch or needs anything. So you can reach out to me. And it was great talking with everybody. I hope it was helpful.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Alyssa.
you.
Bye.
All right. I guess we're wrapping up here. So unless anybody has any ideas or anything else to contribute, we don't have anybody for next week, so I can't announce what next week's going to be. But I guess we're good. Do you have anything else, Camilla?
No, nothing new. I mean, I'll be posting some new content on Thrive if you guys are members there for the community online and the forum there. But other than that, yeah, if you have any ideas for a speaker or something that you'd like to talk about in the town hall, please email Camille or I, because we want the focus of the calls to be what the community needs. So that really comes down to all of you.
All right, everybody, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you very
Thank you.
much. Bye-bye now.
Bye.